Welcome to the Architects of Ambition, the podcast where dreams take shape and futures are built. I'm Lyndon Dover, your guide on this journey of discovery and design, brought to you by Weaver, the online platform that's connecting contractors with the visionaries of architecture. Every episode, we delve into the minds of those who dare to imagine and create the spaces we live, work, and play in. Let's get started. Remy, hi. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting me today, Lyndon.
Not at all. Well, look, before we get stuck into what we're terming the Green Revolution, a discussion about how small UK practices like RemyCT are building a path to a sustainable future, it'd be great to find out a bit more about yourself and the companies that you're running, and just how you got to where you are today.
My name is Remy Connolly Townsend. I am the founder of RemyCT Studio, an architectural practice which is based within Hackney Wick. And we started the practice off of a development which we ran, which is Maryland House, where we played lead architect and developer. From that, later on, I co-opened Kit London with Sarah Nasrallah, which is a small property development practice which develops infill housing predominantly around East London.
Amazing. Right, lots of hats. Normally if you're an architect or designer, you're juggling some hats and some balls, but when you have two companies, I can imagine it's extremely busy. I'd like to kick off with what you perceive in terms of kind of sustainability and the knowledge that's within the small practices that maybe your peers, your competitors, like how aware do you think people are of how to design sustainably?
So starting off with, this is always a conversation of what is sustainability, I think is a good topic that will probably run through the conversation. Sustainability is, from material, methodology, the usage, the lifestyle, and well-being within a building. It's the beauty of the building. There's so many, it's an umbrella term, sustainability. And I think that designers and architects and consultants within the built environment have a great theoretical knowledge about sustainability. I think it is about pushing forward and analyzing, and my belief is taking that to the practical. I think that the knowledge is there. I think it is about how the consultancy group bring it into the practical. I think that's where there needs to be a little bit of a push, but the knowledge is there. And also there's a lot of great conversations happening about it, and there's been a lot of shared information. So, there's a positive trail moving forward. It's looking positive, but that's where there needs to be a bit of a push.
And where are those conversations happening at the moment, Remy? Is it sort of within sort of closed WhatsApp groups amongst friends, amongst people maybe you studied with, or is it more external and more of a voice that's like activism, architects who are being activists?
I feel like it's a little bit all around. Some of the conversations that I've really actually enjoyed talking about sustainability actually is with like contractors and manufacturers and so on, and actually sharing a lot of knowledge. And also, I think, within the architectural community, people talk about projects with each other. There's a lot of, back and forth, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what needed to be pushed, what needed to be amended in the practical, and prototyping is becoming a much better conversation. I'm really enjoying the fact of how much contractors and so on are willing to prototype with us. I think that's been where a lot of the conversations happening. And those are the conversations we're enjoying, the fact that they're willing to get in the ring with us in that way.
Yeah, that's great. And you have obviously, with your own developments, you've done probably quite a lot of experimenting as well. Like some architects use their own homes or their own developments to help sort of push the boundary on terms of materials or planning.
100%. We always say, especially with our infill sites and when we're working on them with clients, we've got a series that are going into construction or in construction. And we always say, well, we're putting our money where our mouth is. I think development is always about understanding risk, right? And we believe very heavily in sustainability and testing and innovation, and we're doing it within our own sites. I think you do understand that extra layer of education or conversation that is having to happen between, all parties to bring it to life. But yes, we do test within our own, we see a great conversation with a contractor of how to go about something, and we're definitely wanting to usually test it on our own sites first. But I find it quite exciting. A lot of it has been tested. There is a lot of references. You sometimes do have to look on a global scale, or you have to kind of see it being maybe practiced on different scales. But we definitely do. We see a lot of cool things, and then we're like, oh, that could go on this site. We need to have a go at it. But you need to have the whole team on board, because we need to have you need to have the engineers on board, you need to have the contract on board, you have to have a project manager on board, you need everybody to be in the same headspace whenever you're testing. It isn't, in isolation at all.
Okay, I feel like we're getting on to the challenges of sustainable architecture. Uh, Obviously, making sure that the whole team, from the contractor, the consultants, the client, they're all on board. Are there any other challenges that you come across when you're trying to integrate sustainable principles in your designs?
I know we've already kind of touched on it, but it is communication. It's basically selling the full team the vision, and then that might also mean building control. And it is about communicating the full vision to everybody, and it does take a little bit extra work, but it's trying to explain the benefits of that extra work, not maybe in that moment with I don't know, depending on cost of material or the methodology, or even in regards to the consultancy, but understanding the benefits of what it will take in regards to the lifetime of that, structure of that space. I think, everyone understands running costs. Everybody understands in regards to durable, sustainable, long living design. And it's explaining those benefits, those later benefits, is definitely is a big part of where we see challenges, is basically getting everybody onto the same page and understanding that you can't judge it next to a typical model or a typical program or a typical, process. I think is definitely a, where we see it gets benchmarked next to the typical,
Hmm.
and that's where we find an issue.
I can see that. I definitely hear that from other architects, that there's a almost an education piece that needs to happen
Mhm.
earlier, before you start designing, and
Mhm.
definitely before you start specifying or you're on site. The earlier you can have those conversations, the better.
And also, like I said at the beginning, also clarifying what do they mean by sustainable,
Mm.
because when you ask people what is your definition of sustainable, people talk about materials, or they'll talk about their running costs, or they'll talk about, I think methodology needs to be spoken about a lot more, because you might end up paying more for material, but then if it's more efficient to build, like prefab or whatever, then there is a saver of cost. And then I'm obsessed with the conversation of beauty, creating all the buildings that last the longest are beautiful buildings. That is very sustainable. There's a reason why everyone, loads of people are still living in Victorian houses. They're great houses. It's about talking about beauty within a building is what is going to make it last. And it's also what is going to make people, operate within that space. Wellness, that is sustainability. So I think it's clarifying the brief as well.
Mm.
I know designers always say this, but clarifying the brief, even when every member, from a counsellor or the client to, manufacturer, whoever specifying or aiding with the brief, they need to clarify what they mean by sustainable, because it is an umbrella term.
No, definitely. Well, yeah, I think you're right, and I think getting that tight at the beginning will help you deliver against whatever sustainable targets you might have,
Mm.
or the client's vision. Thinking about what architects are mainly tackling with in London, a lot of the time is pre-war stock. So Victorian, as you mentioned, or Georgian or earlier, and they present a set of challenges. To try and meet modern sustainability standards can be quite a challenge.
Mhm.
What sort of cost-effective strategies have you come across, or would you like to start implementing to make sure that you've got sustainable architecture in London stock pre-war, but staying within budget?
I think it's one defining what that budget is and then the expectations of that budget has to be a first in a program throughout the house of what they're trying to achieve. Again, it's going back to brief. I think it's being realistic on that budget on what you're trying to achieve. Is it the fact that you're creating an addition to the house and you want that section of the house to hit, a certain sustainability? Is it a complete refurbishment? And then I think there's a series of things that when you are refurbishing the home, it can come through in a series of details that can be hit to budget. But I think it's going a bit back to the measure of understanding, creating a realistic budget, because usually, for those homes, they've lasted, hundreds of years, or and Victorian, Edwardian, homes. I think it is about the sustainability and the running. It's usually, and again, the budget, it has to be relative. It has to be relative to a refurbishment. I think that's it's a big question, but I do believe it is a great space for young practices to spend their time, because repurposing is important. I think it is a great space for young practices to be very innovative within their details and investigate, because, we find when we're working on historic buildings, you pull something up. Every building is a prototype, isn't it? You don't know what you're going to find on site. But especially in a historic building, you don't know what you're going to pull up. So, you have to be quite innovative on the go. You don't know what you're going to find. And it is a great space, I think, for young practices to spend their time to be problem solving and innovative and so on. And it's a space where there should be a lot of time spent,
How do you, going back to your sort of you've got your every project's individual, especially for Victorian stock, because you never know what you're going to find, as you say. You've got to have a good contingency. But going back to that sort of client, like teasing out the client brief, I've heard a lot of the time homeowners coming to architects and designers and going, hey, I really want to be sustainable, but I also want to keep my single pane beautiful Georgian windows. Like how do you guys sort of educate them that around, well, you need to insulate, but you might need to double glaze those, you might lose how do you kind of go about sort of helping the client realize that there are some things they can and can't do?
Again, it's communication with the brief. Like you said, it's first really understanding the moments of the home that they appreciate and enjoy and love. And it can be refurbishment and restoration. It might be the fact that certain elements need to be cut, and there might be elements of restoration. And then it's understanding what that means to the budget and what they're trying to achieve. And then I think, there are loads of elements in regards to the details, how floors are put back in, like you said, roof insulation. There's some outline basics which should just be a standard, when new floors are being put in within refurbishments we've done with the roof insulation and so on. That doesn't necessarily usually hurt, the window pane. In regards to double glazing and all the rest of it, I think, again, it's talking to them about cost. If that's something that's really important to you, that's where there needs to be a bit more reality on cost, to make sure that they get the finish that they appreciate, but they're also able to hit sustainability. I think a lot of it is really understanding the amount of work that has to go into, the prep work before going to site. And then also, we're finding in this climate, especially, it's something that should always be done, but even more so, really, really bring the contractor in very early within the tender and actually be part of the process. How would you build this? And then can we get this to align for it to be sustainable on cost, but get them bought into the vision of sustainability as well, in regards to how much material, the methodology and everything. I think that is a way to aid the client, is the fact of, we don't just design something and get it costed and, that's it. It needs to be the design at early stages of tender is done with the contractor that's bought into a sustainable village vision. The whole team needs to come together very early
Yeah,
on. And that's how we're finding to build, to get to the point of where the client, then they can see the reality on cost and the ripple effect at very early and not a shock to the system later on. I think it's then we can problem solve more and to understand what's truly important within the vision of their home.
that's great. And going back to the contractor, obviously, Weaver helping architects and clients find contractors. So we're really interested in how contractors are becoming more sustainable and knowledge around sustainability. So do you find there's pushback? Do you find that you get some contractors you've been working with really well on more traditional builds, and then you're like, guys, you're really good at that. The same principles, come and work on this more sustainably rooted design. Do you find that you're like, oh, why are we doing like this, Remy? Or this sounds really like long-winded, and why can't I just use my normal Celotex?
We've actually we found a great contractor for you guys who I'm probably on the phone to nearly every day at the moment
Okay.
and is brilliant. I take my hat off. We've had some amazing meetings with them. We at very, like I said, early stages. We didn't just issue the tender to them. It was one of our schemes where we brought them in and we had the conversation with the engineer in the room and said, "How do you want to build this? This is sustainable." And they were like, "This is great. I'm not having to problem solve once you've given. You're telling we're doing this together." And I think because we've brought them in, like I said, very early, we've built a brilliant relationship. They understand our process and they understand what we're trying to achieve. And we have been able to understand how they work and what they want to achieve and their margins and everything. So then we've all together been able to bring down cost, discuss sustainability, talk about finish. It's been fantastic. I think that hasn't been that's not a recent issue of ours, if I'm honest. I think we found the issue when it was, we went out to tender. We brought them in too late in the vision of what we were trying to achieve. That's when we found the problems, because then you're just going back and redoing everything, and everybody's kind of invested in the work they've done already. But we've felt that bringing the team together very early, and even we've said, post planning, they've said, "Oh, have you thought about this?" And they've given us ideas about how to construct, because they now know how we work and what we're trying to achieve and our standard. They're part of the design team.
That's
And
great.
that we have found has been a massive great unlocking stage for us. We're probably now just like, let's go. It's great. The studio love it as well. It educates us. The thing about sustainability is sustainability and design, full stop. It's about constant learning. So we're expanding our learning team, and we're educating each other, and they're telling what has gone wrong on other projects in regards to where they've used too much material, where they believe we should be challenging engineering, where we should be considering saving. They've been on so many sites and they can tell us the pros and cons, and then we're able to assess that and go, and choose the right route for us and our vision with the client. So no, we've actually found that it to be very positive in regards to working with the contractors, just as long as we bring them in early.
That's great. Really good, insight into how early collaboration can have a much more seamless design and build process. Really interesting. And then, okay, so you've got your client on board, the contractors on board. You're starting to get a repeatable, sustainable design principles within the practice. What do you think the government could do more? Like, what role do you think governments and policymakers could be doing more of to promote sustainable architecture within small practices like yours?
It is a big question. I think everybody, again, I think the government have to be honest about what they mean about sustainability and what they're trying to achieve. I know I just keep going back to it. I think it's about getting in the ring, even in early design stages and planning. There's now policy that we have to provide a lot of information about sustainability, and it's and I can appreciate the structure in which it's in. There's a certain level of tick box. Have you done this? Have you done that? And I can agree to that. Fine. But I think we could do better by having it be more of a conversation early on. That's from I suppose a local, but I think from a larger government level, I think they need to get into the ring and discuss. They need to allow innovation. They need to allow the contingency to allow for, like we said, the prototyping and not expecting the norm. They need to be able to allow those conversations to happen and to be resolved and so on. I think in regards to the support of the government, it's a big question. They need to get in the ring and they need to define what they mean by sustainability. And I think there needs to just be a space.
It's a big question. I think a lot of other small practices I've spoken to have said it would really help if there was more grants or more clear access to funds for their clients. Do you find that your clients are taking up on, say, things like the heat pump grants or anything else like that? Do you find that clients are coming armed with information?
I'm going to change my hat for a second from designer to developer.
Great. Okay.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, please.
I've heard about a lot of these grants. I'm yet to see these grants in practice. The theoretical idea of a lot of them sound brilliant. I'm very excited to see them.
Yeah. Okay. Hard to access.
I think they need to. It's a bit like how we said about a certain level of sustainability should just be the norm. It shouldn't really be much of a conversation, in regards to insulation, U values and all the rest of it. There's a certain level of sustainability that we're happy to tick the boxes, but it should just be a general standard at this point. Let's be honest. I feel like we've all spoken about it enough, and it's able to be done. I think they need to be kind of really supporting, I think obviously they should be supporting that in regards to the material costs and so on. So it's more accessible for developers and so on, to make sure that it makes, projects still profitable and all the rest of it. And also it's a advertisement. It's a great, but on a larger scale, I think there needs to be some more actionable.
So I think trying to understand what you're saying, it's sort of, there's British standards, there's building control at the moment that requires you to put in X amount of insulation or have X amount of U values, but there should be increased sort of eco credentials or sustainable way of building that should be the norm. Maybe so you'd have more, you'd maybe get building control to police that and have that as a standard.
Again, it's not that I don't have all the answers or so on, but I feel like, as I mentioned, each building is a prototype, right? Each building is different. So I think at early stages and so on, or maybe it's in regards to the conditions or whoever assesses, not to a certain building by building, but as designers, I think we have a responsibility to do better. We don't have to just be like building controls is this, we can do better. And I think that conversation has kind of, the theoretical of it, we've all spoken about it, that can just happen. I think in regards to, again, discussing the sustainability of the building, it's a larger conversation, like I said, talking from material, methodology, lifestyle, wellness, the usability, that conversation is what I feel we should be talking about. I know we're talking about elements such as installation, but I kind of feel like us going above building standards should be a standard, depending on the prototype of the building. Like that shouldn't really be the conversation. I feel like you asked very early on in the conversation, do you believe that designers and so on are equipped, or they have the knowledge and so on? Yes, they do. And one of the great things about designers and architects is they're trained amazingly well to analyze and to discuss and to communicate ideas. Is like half of our training. That bit we've spoken about. Now, like I said, put it into practical. Well done, it's great. Let's have a wider conversation of what sustainability means, and that's where I feel there should also be a lot of support.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, and to to maybe help other architects, designers thinking about jumping ship, maybe from a bigger practice. I know that you were Foster and Partners for a while, or maybe they are currently running their own traditional architecture studio and go, wow, I haven't gotten this, the way of thinking. I haven't brought, as you say, this conversation to actually practical means. What would be your advice to those studios who want to wake up and drive more sustainability within their practices?
Define what sustainability means to you in your practice. You know, sustainability, like I said, I go between designer and developer hat. Sustainability is also about, from an economical point of view, it's sustainability is, you have to define what sustainability means within your practice and what you're trying to achieve. And then, for an example, if it is to do with the methodology, go make relationships with manufacturers. Don't just sit within your practice. If you want to talk about the wellness within your building, go do research with psychologists, or there's all different forms of consultants. It's like, build your team. It's sustainability is going to be about learning, and your team doesn't just have to be so internal, especially as a small practice. I think one of the things that the studio is, it's an ongoing conversation, and it's an ongoing thing that we're trying to do better at. But we have been building our external team, where the office can pick up the phone and have a really great relationship with a series of different consultants who are part of the design process with us, who are able to teach us. And that doesn't just mean the consultants, like I said, from engineers or M&E or so on. It's also from the manufacturers and from the contractors and so on, who were probably on the phone too much. How would you go about this? What if we wanted to lose less material? How would, we need to bring the cost down. Can we use this existing slab? How do we reinforce it? And that's sustainable. We're trying to keep costs down for the client, and we're also trying to be innovative in regards to what you use, what is there, So I would say build your external team as if you're a small practice, and it's about creating that learning environment, and bring it into the practical.
That's
It's all
great.
great talking about it. Bring it into the practical.
That's really good advice. I really like that. And is there anywhere that obviously keeping up with your continual professional development, apart from leaning on consultants and your sort of expanding kind of core team, like, is there anywhere, resources you go to, your go-to sort of like journals or online resources, or groups that you're part of to help you further your sustainable knowledge?
We are quite lucky at the moment. It is a lot of conversation and sketching and prototyping and so on at the moment. I would say I can't think off the top of my head in regards to a name of
That's
a
all right.
journal or something. My mind's gone a bit
No
whatever.
worries.
I would say we've got a few projects, and we've been able to collaborate with some engineers on, we've sold them the vision of it too hard probably, and they're making a series of prototypes, and they're making them into papers on the ideas we've created together. We're learning from a lot of that at the moment. I'm really trying to push studio into the practical of it all and test, because like we said, and we've been very fortunate that, because we've had developments in the studio, and we will continue to, we are able to put our money where our mouth is. But I think there's also sometimes we have these great ideas, and it's good to see them at a one-to-one scale, see them tested by manufacturers to see if
Are,
that's
are there any, digging into that a bit, are there any that are just like, oh, it was a material or a way of working or a methodology? Is there anything that stands out you can think of that's been like really
um
satisfying?
so it's not, I'm going to say reference one, because I think it's a nice reference, but it's not in the UK, but can be easily done in the
Fair enough.
UK. We're working in Ghana at the moment, and we've got one project that's just gone to site in Tamale, and it's very important wherever we design in the world that we're very contextual. We did this with Maryland House. All the bricks were leftover bricks from different sites around East London. Anyway, and it's very important that we contextually design sustainable in a sustainable way to just Tamale. We don't want to have to get the core structure from anywhere else, even though it's quite far from Accra. So we worked with the engineers and we sold the vision in regards to, we've got these very slim columns that are in the corner of the first floor. And we said, we want these really beautiful slim columns. It's going to be beautiful, the wellness of it all, you know, da, 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 da. And what they've ended up doing is you can't get slim columns in that section of the world, the steel reinforcement that we want. So we're basically welding together the reinforcements rebars that you get inside the concrete, and that's how we're making our column. So then it's sustainable to the area, it can be manufactured in the area, and you know, we're using what is contextually around. To us, that's sustainability. You know, is you look at your context, and obviously that's one example across seas. But we're in London, like I said, with Maryland House, we did the same thing in regards to the material of the house, or the facade of the house, is London stock. A lot of it is SIP bricks, but there are a lot of full stocks, and from a cost point of view, London stocks do cost. And you know, the reclaimed London stocks. So what we did is we went round to different sites where we bought their leftovers.
Great.
And that's how, you know, and we got all mixed. And because London stocks, they all look, no one knows the difference. But again, it's not that the vision has to whatever, it's the problem solving, isn't it? And also contractors and so on come up with ideas like this as well. They'll know, they're in the trade. You have to collaborate with them. And with Tamale, it was the engineers, you know, we went back and forth, and you're able then to be sustainable to the context.
I love that. That's great. What a nice practical story to end on. And if people want to further the conversation, Remi, like what's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Get in touch with the studio's email or LinkedIn, I think is probably the best. I'm on LinkedIn, Remi Conley Townsend, and we're info@remict.com. You know, please contact the practice.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for the conversation today. And that's a wrap on this episode of Architects of Ambition. I'm Lyndon Dover, thanking you for joining us on this podcast, proudly presented by Weaver, where connections are more than just blueprints. They're the building blocks of reality. Until next time, stay ambitious and keep designing those dreams.